Welcome to This Explainer. I'll be your weary palace chronicler today. We're diving straight into a grim, dark parable, a story about how a kingdom's fragile light was actually preserved by the very darkness it was terrified of. We're opening up the forbidden archives to look at a chilling tale of power, paranoia, and, well, the bloody birth of the stage. So let's explore how a terrifying shadow creeping through the cobblestone streets actually managed to save a crown.
To banish the dark is to invite the abyss. Okay, so our tale begins in the kingdom of Londoria. Picture a realm just absolutely choking on the ashes of old civil discord. The air in the capital, thick with paranoia. It was this suffocating miasma of mistrust. The throne was desperately trying to maintain this illusion of perfect, unquestionable control. Literally terrified that just a single dissenting whisper could ignite the powder keg of the populace all over again. Act 1. The King of Light. Right at the center of this realm sat a monarch who was absolutely obsessed with rigid order. He tried to banish vagrancy, poverty, and any tiny hint of rebellion through these unyielding ironclad laws. But, this blinding light? It was born out of pure terror. The king feared the cracks in his own foundation. So he created this meticulously managed, highly artificial court, full of controlled masks and entertainments, just to keep the true darkness of his kingdom at bay. And this perfectly illustrates the fracture of Londoria. On one hand, you've got the king standing in his golden cage of absolute control, projecting this flawless, sterile radiance. But then, just beyond those heavy iron palace gates, his persistent, terrifying shadow was thriving. That shadow was the messy, unpredictable, totally unruly reality of the citizens. We're talking morality plays, vicious bear-baiting pits, and dim, ale-soaked taverns where restless souls gathered in the dead of night. Act 2. The Shadow Whispers. So, as you might guess, the king's strategy of total suppression backfired horribly. With every single decree demanding the darkness to vanish, the restless actors and disenfranchised voices out in the streets, they just grew bolder. The shadow absolutely refused to die. Instead, it started to stretch, warp, and mimic the chaotic nature of a totally new kind of performance. It was literally feeding on the exact suppression the king was applying. Trace the path of this growing darkness with me. Day 1, it starts as mere whispers in those ale-soaked taverns, clandestine meetings far away from the guards' lanterns. By year 1, it spills into the cobblestone streets, masquerading as simple morality plays. And by year 5, it mutates into this vibrant, wildly unpredictable force on the Renaissance stage. The heart of the king tried to project his blinding light of order. The larger and more complex his shadow became, just gorging itself on the discord he was so desperate to erase. And here's the thing, the shadow wasn't just mindless chaos. It found a voice, specifically through a cabal of arcane scholars known as the University Wits. These were ambitious, overreaching spirits who wielded the dangerous, dark magic of compelling narrative and poetry. They used this dark art to directly challenge the established order and the crown itself. Basically, they gave the restless public a dangerous new vocabulary to articulate their deepest, unspoken grievances. How do I silence a shadow that feeds on my own kingdom's discord? Gripped by this morbid fear of the abyss, the king actually spoke to the creeping dark in his chambers. "Silence yourself," he demanded, his voice shaking as he watched the gloom lengthen across the stone floor. But the shadow? It just slithered up the royal tapestries and smiled with 1,000 faceless mouths. "I am made of your own kingdom's discord, your grace," it hissed. "I feed on your panic. I cannot be slain by your ink and parchment decrees. The tighter you squeeze, the larger I loom. You cannot destroy me. You must build a place for me to exist." This was the terrifying realization the king finally arrived at. He couldn't destroy his shadow. The more he fought it, the more monstrous it grew. So to survive, he had to contain it. He had to build a sinister containment vessel, a massive circular structure. Think of it as a quarantine zone for the kingdom's rebellious soul, where his people could gather and witness the reflection of their own struggles, caging that dark, unruly energy into a professionalized beast of a theater. Act 3. The Threat of Rebellion. But as any chronicler of horror knows, containment is a very fragile illusion. Years passed in Londoria, and the king's great circular theater became the pulsing, beating heart of the city. He thought he had trapped the beast within wooden walls, but actually, he had just built a massive, echoing cauldron for their rage, amplifying the exact whispers he wanted to silence.
The king's grip on sanity really started slipping here, as he watched what was unfolding inside his creation. Plays were growing increasingly bold and fiery. Characters on stage were committing the ultimate heresy, questioning the divine right of monarchs. The theater had become a giant, terrifying mirror for rebellion, reflecting the bloodiest potential of the populace right back at the terrified throne.
Consumed by paranoia, terrified of the very shadows he had invited into his city, the king almost made a fatal mistake. He seriously considered tearing the whole structure down. He literally held the torch, ready to burn it all to the ground. He thought that plunging Londaria back into the suffocating safety of dead, silent stability was the absolute only way to save his crown from the fiery ambition of the stage. Act 4. The humble upstart playwright. Just as that torch was about to fall, just as the king's oppressive light was about to snuff out the theater forever and drag Londaria back into an age of silent tyranny, a new figure stepped out from the gloom. A lone, totally unassuming figure bravely approached the paranoid throne, risking the wrath of a monarch teetering right on the edge of madness.
This was an upstart playwright who had secretly studied the dangerous works of those university wits, and he asked for neither gold nor favor. He didn't flinch before the king. He wasn't there to beg. Instead, he opened up a grimoire of the human condition and presented a radical, gruesome truth to the monarch about the chaos that was brewing in the hearts of his citizens.
He explained the real dark magic of the stage. 1. Reflect human chaos upon the stage. 2. Let citizens pour their passions into that artifice. And 3. In doing so, purge the kingdom of its darker impulses. He argued that reflecting this chaos wasn't fueling rebellion at all. It was a psychological bloodletting. By giving the darkness a stage, the theater literally bled the poison of rebellion right out of the kingdom's veins, leaving the citizens exhausted, purged, and entirely pacified.
Act 5. The Vessel of Order. So, the king, hiding out in the dark recesses of his royal box, watched as this playwright's beautiful yet totally morbid theory was proven true right before his very eyes. He watched the faces of his citizens, illuminated by the eerie glow of the stage, weeping, gasping, completely captivated by the horror, the tragedy, and the bloody defiance playing out safely in front of them.
The king finally saw that his people, who absolutely might have turned their violent frustrations directly toward his throne, were instead safely pouring those deadly passions into the artifice of the stage. The theater wasn't a threat to his order. It was actually the ultimate vessel for it. It was a cage that the wild beasts willingly locked themselves inside.
He realized that a crown just cannot survive on blinding light alone. The theater is not a threat, it's a vessel for order. Shadows must be allowed to speak so the king's light can endure. By allowing those shadows a controlled space to speak, his rigid order was preserved, balanced perfectly by the messy, beautiful, and sometimes incredibly dangerous truth of the people's stories.
Are your own dark impulses being contained by the shadows you watch on screen today? As your weary chronicler bids you farewell from this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that might haunt you long after we're done. Look at the glowing screens you watch every single day, the dramatic, horrifying, rebellious stories you consume. Ask yourself, are your own dark impulses being safely contained by the shadows you watch on screen right now?